They always tell you to trust your gut. My gut told me I was being hunted through the woods of Blackwood Ridge. So when a man finally cornered me in that old cabin, I did what I had to do to survive. The only problem, he wasn't the hunter. He was a park ranger, and he was there to rescue me. My name is Liam. For the last 6 years, I've worked as a data analyst for a logistics firm, a job that felt like drowning in a sea of numbers. Every day was about finding the signal in the noise, looking for patterns in the chaos of shipping manifests and fuel consumption charts. I lived on a diet of Excel spreadsheets and lukewarm coffee from the breakroom Keurig. The world, for me, had been reduced to pivot tables and predictive models. But the more I stared at those glowing rectangles, the more I felt a crucial part of myself atrophy, the part that could feel the world instead of just calculating it. You might be wondering why I didn't just quit. I honestly think it was because the job itself felt like a puzzle I was supposed to solve, a test of endurance. But the cost was becoming too high. I'd read books, you know the kind, the ones you see in airport bookstores, pop psychology, neo-stoicism, survivalist manuals. They all circled the same idea. Modern man had lost his instincts, traded his gut for algorithms, and I believed it. I felt it in my own life, in the way I'd second-guess every decision, building pros and cons lists for things as simple as what to have for dinner. My internal compass was broken, and I was navigating my life with a faulty GPS, so I decided to do something about it. I took a 2-week leave of absence, telling my boss it was for a family matter. It wasn't a total lie. I felt like I was losing a part of my family, the primal ancestor inside me who knew how to read the clouds and listen to the wind. I packed my old sedan and drove north to Blackwood Ridge National Park, a place I'd chosen specifically for its ruggedness. The online forums described it as unforgiving, which was exactly what I wanted. I needed a hard reset. My plan was simple. A 5-day solo trek. No phone. I left it locked in my glove compartment. The only concession to technology was a small, brick-like satellite messenger for genuine, life-or-death emergencies. I wanted to recalibrate, to strip away the noise of modern life and see if I could find that primal signal inside myself again. I wanted to feel the kind of certainty that comes not from data, but from deep within. The air that hit me when I stepped out of my car at the trailhead was almost shocking in its purity. It was crisp and cool, smelling of pine and damp earth, a scent so rich and complex, it felt like a language I had forgotten how to speak. I shouldered my pack, the weight of it feeling good and real on my back. I looked up at the trailhead sign, a simple carved piece of wood that read, Blackwood Ridge Trail, 12 miles. This was it, the entry point, the place where the spreadsheets ended and the world began. It felt right. My gut, for the first time in a long, long time, told me I was exactly where I needed to be. The first day was magnificent. The trail was a clear, well-trodden path that wound its way through ancient stands of Douglas fir, trees so tall they seemed to hold up the sky itself. The sun filtered through the canopy in shifting, dusty patterns, and the only sounds were the steady crunch of my boots on the packed earth, the distant chatter of birds, and the whisper of the wind through the pines. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, the constant buzz of anxiety in my head started to fade. The numbers, the deadlines, the endless projections, they all felt a million miles away. I was just a man, walking. I was in my element, making good time, feeling my leg muscles burn in a way that was clean and honest. It was mid-afternoon when I saw him. The trail had climbed onto a ridge and then folded back on itself in a long switchback. I stopped to drink some water and found myself looking across a shallow, tree-choked ravine to the next leg of the trail I'd be on in about 15 minutes. He was over there, maybe 100 yards away, walking in the same direction as me. He was just a figure, really. From that distance, I couldn't make out any details, Not the color of his pack, not the clothes he was wearing, just the general shape of a hiker moving through the woods. But the moment I saw him, something inside me went cold. It wasn't a thought, it was a physical sensation, a low-frequency hum of wrongness that started in the pit of my stomach. My gut instinct, that dormant muscle I'd come here to exercise, clenched hard. There was no reason for it. He was just another hiker in a national park, on a popular trail. It was perfectly normal. I told myself not to be paranoid, that this was just my overstimulated city brain projecting threats where there were none. My mind was trained to find anomalies in data, and here it was, trying to find one in the real world, turning a perfectly ordinary event into a harbinger of doom. But I couldn't shake the feeling. Something about his pace. It was too steady, too methodical. It didn't have the natural rhythm of someone enjoying a walk. It felt measured, efficient. It felt predatory. I tried to dismiss it, to force the feeling down with logic. He was probably just an experienced trekker, someone with a better stride than me. But the feeling wouldn't leave. It was a clear, sharp signal, cutting through the noise of my own rationalizations. And it was telling me one thing, one simple, terrifying thing: danger. I watched him for another minute, maybe more, until the trail he was on curved behind a thick stand of firs and he was gone. But the feeling remained. It was like an afterimage, burned onto my mind, a silhouette of wrongness. I pulled out my folded waterproof map. My rational mind, the data analyst, took over for a second. It pointed out the obvious. The main Blackwood Ridge Trail continued in a long, meandering loop, a path trodden by thousands of hikers before me. It was safe, it was predictable, but the signal from my gut was screaming now, drowning out all logic. It wasn't a gentle suggestion anymore. It was a blaring alarm telling me that putting distance between myself and that man was the only priority, and I trusted it. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a kind of primal clarity that I hadn't felt in years. This was it. This was exactly what I come here for, to stop analyzing and start listening to that inner voice. The map showed another, smaller path marked with a dotted line, the old Deer Creek Trail. A small note printed beside it read, "Less maintained." It was an old logging route that cut westward, away from the main loop and deeper into the park. It was a choice between a known quantity and an unknown variable. A week ago, I would have made a spreadsheet. Right now, the decision was already made. I took the Deer Creek Trail. It was immediately more difficult. The path wasn't so much a path as a suggestion. It was overgrown, and I had to push through the wet, heavy branches of ferns and push aside low-hanging limbs that snagged at my clothes. But with every difficult step, I felt a profound sense of relief. I was in control. I had sensed the threat and acted decisively. I wasn't just a passive observer anymore. That evening, I made camp in a small, sheltered clearing. As the sun went down, the sky turned a bruised purple, and the woods came alive with sounds, the deep, resonant hoot of an owl somewhere nearby, the rustle of some small animal in the undergrowth, the constant creak and groan of tree limbs shifting in the wind. Normally, I would have found it peaceful, but now every sound was amplified, filtered through the lens of my unease. I was no longer just hearing the forest. I was analyzing it for threats. Each sound was data. The owl wasn't just an owl. It was a sentinel, watching. The sharp snapping of a twig wasn't a squirrel. It was a footstep. My instincts, I told myself, were on high alert. I felt sharp, honed. I was finally awake. I slept fitfully, my hand never far from the handle of the large survival knife sheathed on my belt. Every rustle of leaves, every moan of the wind jolted me awake. I woke the next morning feeling exhausted, but also sharp in a way I hadn't been before. The fear had honed my senses, stripped away the unnecessary. I packed up my damp tent quickly, not even bothering to make coffee, and pushed on, eager to put more miles behind me. The Deer Creek Trail was brutal. It climbed and fell with no regard for comfort, and my pace was slow. My thighs ached and my lungs burned, but I welcomed the pain. It was real. It was almost noon when I finally stopped for water. I had reached a high, windswept ridge that offered a clear panoramic view of the valley below and the corresponding ridge on the other side. I unscrewed the cap of my canteen and scanned the landscape, feeling a grim sense of satisfaction. There was no one. Just endless miles of green and brown wilderness under a vast empty sky. I had done it. I had outmaneuvered him. And then I saw him. He was on the opposite ridge, maybe half a mile away, moving through the trees. A dark figure against the green. It was impossible to be sure it was the same man, but I knew. My gut knew. He was moving parallel to me, again. A wave of cold dread washed over me, far more intense and sickening than before. My carefully constructed sense of control shattered into a million pieces. This couldn't be a coincidence. I had taken a different trail, a harder, more obscure route that wasn't even on some of the park maps. There was no logical reason for him to be there, no logical reason at all, which meant the only explanation was the illogical one. He was following me. He had to be. My mind raced trying to piece it together, trying to run the data. Had he seen me take the fork in the path? Had he doubled back and followed my tracks? But how could he have possibly gotten ahead of me? The terrain he would have had to cover was even more treacherous than mine. The questions swirled into a vortex of paranoia, and I felt my breath catch in my chest. I fumbled in my pack for the satellite messenger, my fingers clumsy and trembling. The calm, calculating analyst was gone. I was just a terrified animal. I had to tell someone. This was no longer just a feeling, a bad vibe, a statistical anomaly. This was real. The little green light on the messenger blinked, confirming a connection to a satellite orbiting miles above the Earth. I typed the frantic message to my best friend Sarah. My thumbs felt thick and useless. In danger. Being followed. Men on trail. Blackwood Ridge. I hit send, my heart hammering against my ribs. A few agonizingly long minutes later, her reply came through, a string of text on the tiny monochrome screen. Liam, what do you mean? Are you okay? I explained the situation in a series of clipped, breathless messages. I told her about the feeling I got, about changing trails, about seeing him again and possibly across the valley. Her response was not what I wanted. It wasn't what I needed. Liam, it's a huge park. People hike. Are you sure you're not just stressed? You were pretty wound up before you left. Her words felt like a betrayal, a slap in the face. She wasn't listening. She was trying to rationalize, to file my raw terror into a neat, logical box. She was applying her safe, urban logic to a situation she couldn't possibly understand. I typed back, jabbing at the little keys, my frustration boiling over. Sarah, you don't get it. My instincts are telling me this is real. I know it. Her final message before the connection dropped was infuriating. Just be careful. Maybe find a ranger station. Don't do anything crazy. Please. Don't do anything crazy. To her, crazy was trusting my own senses over the comfortable illusion of safety. To me, crazy would be ignoring them. I felt a surge of cold anger and resolve. I was on my own. No one was going to save me but me. The systems we rely on, friends, logic, the expectation of normalcy, they were useless out here. There was only the signal and the noise. I looked at the map again, my eyes tracing the dotted line of the Deer Creek Trail. Then I looked up at the dense, untracked wilderness spreading out before me, a chaotic wall of green and shadow. The solution was obvious. It was the oldest trick in the book. To lose a tracker, you have to abandon the trail. You have to become part of the noise. I folded the map, stuffed it into my pocket, and turned away from the path. Without a second thought, I plunged directly into the forest. Going off trail was a catastrophic mistake. In my mind, it had seemed like a brilliant tactical move. In reality, it was suicide. The forest floor wasn't the neatly packed earth of the trail. It was a chaotic tangle of gnarled roots, moss-slicked rocks, and thorny bushes that tore at my clothes and my skin. My progress slowed to a painful crawl. That clear, confident feeling of being in control evaporated within minutes, replaced by a gnawing, full-body anxiety. Every few minutes I would freeze, listening, convinced I could hear the snap of a twig or the rustle of clothing just behind me. I glanced over my shoulder so many times that my neck began to ache with a dull, persistent throb. Then the weather turned. The sky, which had been a brilliant and different blue, darkened to a bruised, heavy purple. A cold drizzle began to fall, quickly intensifying into a torrential downpour. The temperature plummeted. Within minutes, I was soaked to the bone. A deep, invasive chill settled deep into my body, and my teeth began to chatter uncontrollably. My compass, my one piece of reliable analog tech, was useless without clear landmarks, and the dense, dripping canopy blotted out the sky, turning midday into a gloomy twilight. I was lost. Utterly and completely lost. The world began to feel unreal, like a poorly rendered video game. The trees seemed to lean in, their bare, wet branches like grasping arms. My mind, stripped of reliable input and fueled by fear, began to create its own data. I started to see things, a flicker of movement at the edge of my vision that vanished when I turned, a shape in the deep shadows that looked, for just a second, like a man's silhouette. The line between what was real and what my fear was projecting began to blur and then dissolve entirely. My thoughts became fragmented, looping back on themselves in a paranoid fugue. He's out there. He drove me this way on purpose. This is his trap. I was no longer a hiker seeking enlightenment. I was prey, and the forest was his weapon. I stumbled through the forest for hours, driven by a fear that had become my only fuel. I have no idea how long I was out there. Time lost all meaning. I was bleeding from a dozen small cuts on my arms and face. My muscles screamed in protest with every step, and the hypothermia was making my mind foggy and slow. Just as I was about to collapse, convinced I was going to die out there in the cold and the rain, I saw through the gray, blurring sheets of water. A dark shape nestled in a small clearing. A cabin. It was an old, dilapidated ranger cabin, the kind they use for seasonal work or emergencies. Its wood was weathered to a silvery gray and the roof was sagging in the middle, but to me it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. A wave of profound, overwhelming relief washed over me, so powerful it almost brought me to my knees. It felt like a miracle, a sign. My gut, which had been screaming in raw terror for hours, now pulsed with a different, calmer signal. Safety. Sanctuary. My instincts hadn't failed me after all. They had led me here, to the one place I could survive the storm he had driven me into. The door was locked, of course, but a nearby window was boarded up with a couple of loose planks. I used the heavy pommel of my survival knife to pry the planks free, the screech of old nails pulling from rotten wood sounding impossibly loud. I used the same knife to shatter the glass, then carefully crawled inside. It was musty and dark, smelling of damp earth and mice, but it was dry. There were old, scratchy-looking blankets piled in a corner, and on a dusty shelf a few dented cans of beans. I was safe. I had listened to the signal, and it had brought me through the storm. I had won. I had proven that my instincts were real, that they were a tool I could trust. I was a survivor. I devoured one of the cans of cold beans, shoveling them into my mouth with my fingers, the metallic taste filling my mouth. The relief was so profound it was almost painful. I wrapped myself in the musty, damp-smelling blankets and huddled in the darkest corner of the cabin, listening to the relentless drumming of the rain hammer against the old tin roof. I was starting to feel a semblance of warmth return to my core when a new sound cut through the storm. A voice. Hello? Anyone in there? My blood ran cold. I froze. Every muscle in my body tensed and rigid. It was him. He had found me. The sanctuary was a cage. Hello? This is Park Ranger Frank Miller. I received a distress signal from a satellite messenger in this area. Is anyone in there? Are you all right? It was a trap. The voice was calm, concerned, professional, and that's what made it so utterly terrifying. It was a perfect performance. My gut, which had been so sure of this place, now screamed with a shrill, piercing alarm. He was pretending to be a ranger to lure me out. How did he know about the messenger? My mind spiraled into a black hole of paranoia. He must have gotten to Sarah, tracked her down, threatened her, forced her to call it in. It was an elaborate, twisted game. Your friend, Sarah Peterson, called us. She said you were in trouble. We've been looking for you, son. There's a nasty storm rolling in, and that cabin isn't stable. You need to come out. He knew her name. The confirmation sent a jolt of pure, undiluted terror through me. My heart felt like it was going to beat its way out of my chest. This wasn't just some random stalker, some thrill seeker. This was something else entirely, something intelligent, patient, and deeply, deeply malevolent. I didn't answer. I pressed myself further into the corner of the cabin, trying to make myself as small and invisible as possible. I was a cornered animal, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. Son, I can see you broke in, the voice continued, still infuriatingly calm. I'm not here to get you in trouble. I'm worried about you. You could have hypothermia. Please, just open the door so we can talk. His voice was so reasonable, so persuasive. It was the voice of a predator, lulling its prey into a false sense of security before the final strike. I scanned the dark cabin frantically, my eyes adjusting to the deep gloom. I was looking for a weapon, anything to give me a fighting chance. My gaze fell on a rusted metal box tucked under a rotten wooden cot in the corner. I crawled over to it on my hands and knees, my movements silent and desperate. I used my knife to pry the corroded latch open. Inside, nestled in decaying yellow foam, was a flare gun and 2 thick red cartridges. My heart leaped. A wave of adrenaline, cold and sharp, washed through me. My instinct had led me here not just for shelter, but for this. It was the ultimate signal. This was my weapon. This was my answer. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely fit the cartridge into the gun, but I managed, the finality of the click echoing in a small, tense cabin. I'm not going to wait much longer, son, the voice from outside said, and now I could hear a new edge of urgency in it. The impatience of the hunter growing tired of the chase. That roof could come down any minute. For your own safety, I'm going to have to force the door. I scrambled over to the door, pressing my back against the splintered wood. The heavy plastic grip of the flare gun clutched in my trembling hands. He was coming. The final confrontation was here. It was him or me. The door rattled violently in its frame. A heavy shoulder slammed against it from the outside, and the whole cabin seemed to shake. Liam, is that you? Your friend said your name was Liam. Don't make me do this. He knew my name. The confirmation which should have been terrifying barely registered. My mind was already somewhere else. The wood of the door groaned, splintering near the rusted latch. He was strong. Another slam and the door bowed inward, a visible crack appearing in the center plank. Panic, pure and absolute, consumed me. All reason was gone, burned away by the white-hot certainty of my fear. This was a fight for my life. He was going to kill me. He had hunted me for 2 days, and now he had me cornered. The door shuddered again, about to give way. "It's for your own good," he yelled from the other side. I raised the flare gun, aiming it at the center of the door where the wood was weakest. My mind was screaming a single repeating word, a mantra of pure survival. Survive, survive, survive. I closed my eyes and pulled the trigger. The sound wasn't a loud bang like a real gun. It was a thick, muffled, a strange, anticlimactic sound. The recoil was surprisingly powerful, slamming my shoulder hard into the wall behind me. I opened my eyes. A small, perfectly round hole had appeared in the door, glowing with an angry red light from within. Outside there was a strange, wet grunt. It was a sound of surprise and pain. It was followed by the sound of a heavy body slumping against the door, and then a long, slow scraping noise as it slid down to the wet ground. Then silence. Nothing but the steady, indifferent drumming of the rain on the tin roof. I stood there for a long time, my ears ringing with a low, tinny hum. The silence that followed the violence was more terrifying than the noise had been. I was breathing in short, ragged gasps, my lungs aching. A strange, unfamiliar smell began to seep through the small, glowing hole in the door. It was an acrid, chemical scent, mixed with something else, something organic and sickeningly sweet, like burnt meat and wool. It smelled like burnt wool. Slowly, numbly, I lowered the flare gun, its plastic frame feeling impossibly heavy in my hand. My terror, the white-hot panic that had been my entire world just moments before, began to recede. It was replaced by something colder, a creeping, horrifying curiosity. I had to know. I had to see what I had done. My hand, acting of its own accord, reached for the broken latch. The door swung open with a low, agonizing groan. He was lying on his back in the mud, his body half submerged in a dirty puddle of rainwater. He was a man in his 50s, with a kind, weathered face and a neatly trimmed graying mustache. He was wearing the official forest green uniform of the National Park Service. A large, blackened, cauterized hole had been burned through the chest of his thick wool jacket and the khaki shirt beneath. His eyes were open, staring blankly up at the dark, weeping sky. He was just a man, a park ranger. I had killed him. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. A sound escaped my throat, a dry, wretched sob that was swallowed by the storm. My gut, my instinct, my precious signal, it had lied. It had lied, and it had turned me into a monster. I don't know how long I sat there in the mud beside him. Time had ceased to have any meaning. The rain eventually lessened, turning from a roar to a soft, persistent drizzle. Eventually, I heard new voices, the sounds of shouting, and a rescue team moving through the trees. They found me there, shivering, incoherent, still cradling the cold, stiffening hand of the man I had killed. They wrapped me in thick, warm blankets and spoke to me in soft, reassuring tones, but their words were just noise, meaningless data. My mind was a blank slate, wiped clean by the horror. As they were leading me away, helping me stumble through the woods, a voice crackled over one of their radios. It was another rescuer from a different team searching another part of the park. "We found him," the static-filled voice said. "The missing hiker. He's at the bottom of the Black Creek Ravine, about a mile from the main trailhead." My rescuer, a young man with kind eyes, keyed his mic. "Is he responsive?" There was a long pause, filled with the hiss of static. "Negative. The voice on the radio finally replied. Looks like he fell the day before yesterday. He's been gone a while. The world tilted on its axis and then shattered. The hiker, the man on the parallel trail, the methodical, predatory figure I had been so sure was hunting me. He had fallen. He was dead or dying that first afternoon, long before I ever took that fateful paranoid turn off the main path. He was never following me. He was never there. The threat was a ghost, a phantom I had created from a single meaningless sighting. The entire chase, the paranoia, the kill or be killed standoff in the cabin. It had all been a story I'd told myself, a terrifying piece of fiction. And the villain of that story had been me. I am telling you this from a quiet room. The walls are a soft, neutral beige color, and the window, which has no bars, looks out onto a well-manicured lawn with a large oak tree in the center. There are no woods here. There are no shadows. They tell me I experienced a psychotic break brought on by extreme stress and exacerbated by isolation and hypothermia. They use clinical sterile terms like patternicity and confirmation bias. They say my brain, desperate for a narrative to explain my free-floating anxiety, latched onto the first available stimulus, a random hiker, and built a monster out of nothing. It's a very logical, very clean explanation. It fits the data perfectly, but their logic is no comfort. I am broken in a way that feels permanent. I have destroyed a man's life, a family, my own soul, all because I chose to trust a feeling. I went into the wilderness to find my primal self, to awaken some dormant noble savage. And I found him. He is a terrified, paranoid creature that sees threats in every shadow and murders the people who come to help. Now I live in the aftermath, in the quiet hum of this controlled environment. I have no gut, no instinct left. I killed it along with that poor man. When I feel a flash of anger or a pang of sadness or a brief, fleeting moment of joy, I can't trust it. I have to stop and analyze it. Is it real, or is it just my broken mind creating another phantom? Is this feeling a signal, or is it just more noise? That is the true horror. It isn't the man in the woods. It's the terrifying, undeniable truth that the most dangerous place in the world can be the 6 inches of space between your own ears. And the most frightening monster you will ever face is the one who whispers to you in your own voice and convinces you he's a friend. That was the most horrifying moment of my life. To this day, I still can't wrap my head around all of this. The details are still a bit fuzzy, and I'll most likely never get any answers regarding this experience. Thank you for watching Horror Story. If there's anything to learn from this story, it would be to trust your instincts, but also to question them. Don't forget to subscribe to Horror Story and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next video. We'll see you in the next one.